The night had settled quietly over the city. Streetlights flickered gently, casting golden glows over the sidewalks. In a small, older concert hall near the edge of downtown, a man moved quietly among the rows of seats, pushing a worn broom across the polished wooden floors. He was a janitor by profession, but a father first, carrying the weight of responsibility on his shoulders with every step he took. His name was never known to most of the people who passed by the hall. Yet here he spent hours after each evening's concert, cleaning and preparing the space for the next day. Tonight, the hall was nearly empty. The musicians had packed up their instruments. The audience had left hours ago, and the stage lights were dimmed to a soft, warm glow. The man hummed quietly to himself as he swept, a low, soft melody that mingled with the faint echoes of applause that still seemed to linger in the hall. He hummed not because anyone was listening, but because the music had a way of making the long hours feel lighter. His child's face often came to mind as he worked. He imagined singing these melodies to them, hoping someday they would know the joy and comfort that music brought him. As he moved near the grand piano, adjusting the dust cover and carefully polishing the black wood, he noticed a figure approaching from the far end of the hall. The man paused, raising his head slightly, unsure if he should greet this visitor or continue his work quietly. The figure was unmistakable. A Navy admiral, tall, commanding, yet carrying a warmth that softened her presence, walked confidently through the rows. She wore her uniform with the crispness and pride that came from years of discipline, her medals and ribbons catching the soft light as she moved. It was rare for someone of her rank to appear in such a modest space without a large entourage, and it immediately caught the janitor's attention. The Admiral's eyes fell on him, and she smiled faintly, as though she recognized something familiar in the way he moved, the way he carried himself even in his humble position. She stopped a few feet away and said, "Good evening." Her voice was firm yet gentle, holding a hint of amusement. The janitor froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. He wasn't accustomed to talking to people of such high rank, especially in such an informal setting. He offered a small nod and a quiet, "Good evening, Mom." The Admiral glanced around the hall, then back at him. "You've been working late," she observed, her tone casual but interested. "Do you enjoy it?" Her question was simple, but it carried an unexpected kindness, a curiosity that seemed genuine rather than polite. The janitor hesitated. Most people didn't care about the long hours or the repetitive work. Most people saw only the uniform he wore over his clothes, the broom in his hand, the sweat on his forehead. But here was someone who noticed the effort, who asked without judgment. I like it," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "It's quiet at night. I can think, and I can hum." He gestured toward the piano. "Sometimes I even imagine playing, though I don't." His voice was low, humble, carrying the weight of a lifetime of responsibilities. He didn't know why he was sharing this, but there was something about her presence that made it feel safe to speak. The Admiral's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Humming, huh? Is that your secret talent?" She asked lightly, though her curiosity was clear. She stepped closer, tilting her head slightly, her hands clasped behind her back. She had the air of someone used to commanding attention, yet there was a softness here, an openness that made the janitor's heart beat a little faster. "I guess," he murmured. "I've sung before, but it's just me, mostly." He hesitated, unsure if he should continue. He was used to being overlooked, to the world, assuming that someone in his position had little to offer beyond cleaning and maintenance. He never expected anyone like her to pause and notice him, let alone care about his musical inclinations. "Just you, huh?" the Admiral said, taking a step closer. "I like that. Confidence in quiet moments is rare." Her words weren't a compliment about appearance or status. They were about character, something deeper. The janitor felt a strange warmth spread through him, a mix of pride and disbelief. Nobody had ever seen him this way before. He was simply a man trying to do his best for his child, quietly navigating the struggles of life, and now, unexpectedly, someone remarkable had paused to acknowledge it not as he returned to his sweeping. The Admiral wandered closer to the piano, resting her hand gently on the polished surface. She looked around, inspecting the room, then turned her gaze back to him. "You sing? Connected to the music here," she said, "like it's part of who you are, not just the building you maintain." The janitor stopped for a moment, letting the broom rest against his leg. Her observation struck him in a way he did not expect. Most people never saw him beyond his uniform, beyond the broom in his hand. Yet here was someone recognizing a piece of his soul. He cleared his throat. "I suppose. Music has always been a part of me. Before the job, before everything else. It was there, always." His words were simple, but they carried a quiet strength. He had learned long ago to value small joys, to hold on to the things that made life meaningful despite hardships. Music was one of those things. It was a language she understood even when words failed. The Admiral smiled, a faint, teasing smile that hinted at mischief beneath her composed exterior. She leaned slightly toward him and picked up a sheet of music lying near the piano. "I wonder," she said slowly, almost in thought, "if you sang this piece, just for fun, would it surprise me?" Her tone was playful, like a challenge wrapped in humor. The janitor looked at the sheet, then back at her, unsure how to respond. He recognized the piece immediately. It was a Mozart composition, something he had learned to play in his youth, though he had never performed it in front of anyone. The notes seemed to call to him, and for a brief moment he forgot the broom, the dust, the empty hall. He forgot the long hours, the responsibilities, the weight of his daily life. All that remained was the music and the presence of someone extraordinary asking him to share it. I could try," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. He felt a flutter of nervousness, a sudden rush of adrenaline. He hadn't sung in years, and never for someone like her. Yet the music flowed naturally from his memory, and he felt a strange confidence rising within him. The Admiral's gaze remained fixed on him, waiting, curious, the faintest trace of a smile on her lips. The hall was silent except for the distant hum of the city outside. The janitor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. It was strange how life sometimes offered these unexpected opportunities, small miracles in ordinary settings. Here he was, a man who swept floors and wiped down counters, about to sing in front of a Navy admiral who had noticed something he had long thought invisible. He began to hum, softly at first, letting the notes rise from his memory. His voice was low, gentle, and hesitant, but it carried a clarity that made the silence in the hall feel almost sacred. The Admiral listened intently, leaning slightly on the piano, her expression shifting from amusement to intrigue. The janitor felt the music connecting him to something larger than himself, a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. As he continued, he realized he wasn't just singing for her, or even for recognition. He was singing for the joy of it, for the feeling that this moment mattered, that even a janitor could hold something beautiful within him. The notes flowed through the hall, intertwining with the faint echoes of the past concerts, creating a delicate harmony of effort, hope, and quiet determination. The Admiral's smile widened ever so slightly. "You have a gift," she said softly, almost to herself. The janitor froze mid-note, unsure if she had spoken aloud or just thought it. Her words, simple and sincere, struck him more deeply than any applause ever could. For a brief moment, the burdens of life, the long shifts, the sleepless nights, the constant worry for his child seemed to lift. Someone had seen him, really seen him, and that recognition felt like a gentle hand on his shoulder, steadying him in a world that often ignored the quiet heroes. He finished the hum, letting the last note linger in the air. The hall remained still, as though the music had suspended time itself. The Admiral's eyes met his, and in them he saw a mixture of respect, surprise, and admiration. He was no longer just the janitor. For this brief, shining moment, he was a man whose talent, however hidden, had been acknowledged by someone remarkable. He smiled faintly, feeling a warmth spread through him that had little to do with pride and everything to do with connection. Life had a way of surprising him, and sometimes those surprises came in the most unexpected forms. A Navy admiral noticing a janitor's hum, a piece of Mozart, a quiet hall late at night. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, ordinary life could hold extraordinary moments too. He picked up the broom again, but now it felt lighter in his hands. The Admiral lingered near the piano, her presence gentle but commanding, as if she had a sense that this moment was not just chance. It was a beginning, a spark of possibility in the quiet rhythm of their ordinary lives. And the janitor, with his heart still echoing the last note of his hum, felt that he was ready for whatever might come next. The janitor had just finished sweeping the last corner of the hall when the Admiral straightened up near the piano. Faint smile playing on her lips. The soft glow of the lights reflected on the polished black surface, and for a moment the hall seemed suspended between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The janitor felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. He wasn't sure what to expect from her next words, but somehow he felt that whatever happened would be memorable. She leaned slightly closer, her voice calm but teasing. "You know," she said slowly, "you have quite the voice. I didn't expect it from someone. Well, from you." Her words were gentle, yet carried a playfulness that made the janitor blush. He had long grown used to people underestimating him. Most people only saw the uniform, the broom, the quiet man cleaning floors, not the person beneath. Hearing her speak this way felt strange and thrilling. He shook his head slightly, trying to hide his embarrassment. "It's nothing," he said softly. "Just something I do for myself. I've never performed for anyone, really." He paused, wondering if he sounded arrogant or foolish. "It's just music." The Admiral's eyes sparkled, and she let out a light laugh, the kind that came from genuine amusement rather than politeness. "I like that," she said. "There's honesty in your humility. But it makes me wonder, could you do more than just hum? Could you sing a piece properly, here, for me? Just for fun?" She tilted her head slightly, as if daring him, yet it was clearly meant as a playful challenge. The janitor's heart skipped a beat. Singing a piece in front of a stranger was one thing, but this was someone extraordinary, someone whose presence carried authority and respect. He felt his hands tighten slightly around the broom handle. I don't know," he stammered. "It's been years since I've sung anything properly, and, well, it's not exactly professional." "Professional or not," the Admiral said, stepping closer and holding up a sheet of music from the piano bench, "I want to hear you try. Let's see what you've got." Her tone was light, almost joking, yet there was a spark of curiosity that made it impossible for him to refuse. He glanced at the music sheet. It was a Mozart piece, something he had studied long ago. He remembered the notes, the flow, and the delicate expressions required. His breath caught his memories of his youth surface times when he had dreamed of performing, when life had seemed simpler. But now, responsibilities, bills, and raising his child alone had taken over. The music was a reminder of a part of himself he rarely indulged. I can try," he said quietly. His voice was low, cautious, but determined. He felt a small thrill at stepping outside his comfort zone. The Admiral's smile widened as she leaned against the piano casually, her eyes fixed on him. "Good," she said. "Go ahead. Show me what you've got. Don't worry about perfection. Just sing." He took a deep breath and placed his hands lightly on the piano, recalling the keys he had known by heart years ago. He imagined the melody in his mind, letting the rhythm guide him. Then, slowly, he began to sing. At first, his voice was quiet, hesitant, unsure. But as he moved through the first few lines, he felt a familiar flow return. His voice grew steadier, richer, carrying the clarity of someone who had once devoted hours to the music. The Admiral watched, her expression shifting from casual amusement to genuine interest. She had seen many performances, many talented people, but there was something different here. The janitor's voice wasn't trained or polished like a professional singer, yet it held a raw honesty, a depth that went beyond technique. It was a voice shaped by life, by struggle, by quiet perseverance. And it resonated in the hall in a way that made every corner feel alive. As the janitor continued. A few of the late-night staff, who lingered near the hall, stopped what they were doing. They had been about to leave when they heard the music, and now they stood frozen, unsure if they should intrude on the private moment. But the sound was captivating, filling the empty hall with warmth. It wasn't just the melody, it was the story behind it, the life behind the voice that made everyone listen. The Admiral leaned slightly forward, resting her hands on the piano, her eyes fixed on him. She noticed the subtle expressions on his face as he sang, the slight furrow of his brow, the gentle rise and fall of his shoulders, the passion in his eyes. She realized that this was more than just a song. It was an unveiling, a glimpse into a life she could never have imagined from the outside. The janitor's voice carried through the hall, powerful yet gentle, filled with a quiet intensity that held everyone's attention. He had never intended to impress anyone. He had only wanted to express the music he loved. And now, as he sang, he felt a strange liberation, a release from the weight of daily life. The broom lay forgotten at his side. The polished floors no longer mattered, and for a few precious minutes, he was free in the music. The Admiral's smile grew broader, a mix of surprise and delight. She had expected a simple hum, a cautious attempt at a few notes, but this was something else entirely. The hall, quiet and empty moments before, seemed to come alive with the resonance of his voice. She could feel the dedication, the life experiences, the perseverance all woven into the tones that filled the space. It was impossible not to be captivated. He reached the crescendo of the piece, his voice soaring with confidence and clarity. Each note was deliberate, flowing naturally from his memory and his heart. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the music guide him, letting himself be carried by it. There was no audience here beyond the Admiral and a few staff, but he felt as though the hall itself was listening, acknowledging his presence, his effort, his talent. When he finished, the hall fell into a deep, quiet stillness. The last note lingered, vibrating softly in the air. The janitor opened his eyes slowly, uncertain of how it had been received. His hands hovered above the piano keys, tense with anticipation. He looked toward the Admiral, who stood motionless for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed softly, a sound that broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. "I wasn't expecting that," she said, her voice warm and filled with admiration. "Not at all." She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him flush slightly. "You have a gift, a real gift. I never imagined someone in your position could sing like that." The janitor shook his head, a mixture of disbelief and humility. "It's just something I've always done," he said. "Nothing special." He felt the old familiar pull of modesty, the urge to downplay himself, but the Admiral didn't seem convinced. She smiled knowingly, as if she understood more than he realized. Nothing special? She repeated, raising an eyebrow. Don't sell yourself short. It's extraordinary. You've hidden it well. I'll give you that. She chuckled lightly, then leaned casually against the piano again. Tell me, how long have you been keeping this talent all to yourself? The janitor thought for a moment. Since I was a boy, he admitted softly. I loved music, but life, it doesn't leave much time for dreams. I work, I take care of my child. I try to get through each day. Music, it's been my companion, my escape. But it's never been more than that. No stage, no audience. Just me, and sometimes humming when I sweep the floors. The Admiral's expression softened, a rare tenderness in her eyes. I understand that, she said quietly. Life takes over, responsibilities pile up, and we often hide our talents, our passions, just to survive. But hearing you, it reminds me that there's more to people than we see. You're remarkable, not just because of your voice, but because you've carried it with you through everything. The janitor felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to being seen in this way. Most of his life, people overlooked him. Most nights, he left the hall quietly, unnoticed and unremarked upon. But now, with this unexpected recognition, something shifted inside him. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly seen, not for what he did to survive, but for who he was. For the talent and spirit he had nurtured quietly. Against all odds, he looked at the Admiral, still standing near the piano, her presence both commanding and gentle. There was a sense of connection, fleeting yet profound, that he couldn't ignore. It was as if this moment had been waiting for him, as if life had arranged a small miracle in the middle of an ordinary night. Thank you, he said finally, his voice steady despite the emotion he felt. I don't know what to say. I haven't shared this with anyone before. You don't have to say anything, she replied with a smile. You let your voice speak, and that's enough. But I will say this, you shouldn't hide it. Not anymore. People deserve to hear what you have to offer. Her words were sincere, gentle guidance wrapped in warmth. He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. She was right, of course. Music had always been part of him, a light he carried quietly. Perhaps it was time to let that light shine beyond the walls of the hall, beyond the quiet nights of sweeping and cleaning. Perhaps this was the moment to take the first small step. The Admiral glanced at the music sheet again, then back at him, a playful glint returning to her eyes. You know, she said with a teasing tone, you've impressed me more than I expected. But I wonder if you could sing the next piece, something a little more challenging. Would you? The janitor paused, surprised by the challenge. But deep down, a small smile tugged at his lips. There was something thrilling about this unexpected game, this playful test from someone he had just met. I suppose I could try, he said softly, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. Admiral laughed lightly, her eyes sparkling. Good, she said. Then let's see what you can really do. No pressure, just honesty. Can you handle that? He nodded, feeling a quiet confidence rising. The music, the hall, the unexpected recognition, it all seemed to come together, creating a moment he would never forget. Whatever happened next, he knew that life had given him a rare opportunity, a chance to step beyond his ordinary routine and show the world a part of himself that had long been hidden. And as he prepared to sing again, he realized that this night, this simple, quiet night of sweeping floors and humming to himself, was about to become something extraordinary. The janitor took a deep breath, feeling the music swell in his chest. The sheet of Mozart in front of him felt heavier than it actually was, not because of the paper, but because of the moment. He glanced at the Admiral, who stood nearby with a playful, expectant smile. Her words had been light, teasing even, but there was a seriousness beneath them. She wanted to see who he truly was, beyond the broom, beyond the uniform, beyond the quiet man no one noticed. And now, in this quiet hall, he had a choice: retreat into his usual life or step fully into the music that had always been part of him. He pressed a finger lightly against the piano keys, feeling the coolness beneath his touch, and then placed his hands in position. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The sounds of the city outside faded. The hum of the fluorescent lights above disappeared. The only thing that existed was the sheet music, the piano, and the person watching him, the Admiral who had seen him, really seen him, and dared him to reveal himself. He began to sing. The opening notes were soft, cautious, but even in their gentleness, there was a clarity that made the hall seem to lean in. The Admiral's eyes widened slightly, her usual composed expression giving way to surprise. This was no ordinary voice. There was a depth, a resonance, a richness that spoke of countless hours of practice long ago, of a lifetime of emotion quietly stored, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As he continued, his confidence grew. His voice strengthened with each line, rising and falling naturally, weaving through the Mozart composition with precision and passion. The janitor closed his eyes briefly, allowing the melody to guide him. The music wasn't just in the notes. It was in his memories, in the long days of struggle, in the nights spent rocking his child to sleep, in the tiny moments of joy he had fought to keep alive. Each phrase of the music carried a piece of his life, and for the first time, someone was hearing it. The Admiral stood quietly, watching every movement, every expression. She had expected talent, perhaps even a pleasant surprise, but this went far beyond her expectations. The janitor's voice wasn't perfect by professional standards. It was raw, genuine, filled with emotion, but that was what made it extraordinary. Each note told a story. Each rise and fall spoke of resilience and quiet determination. She realized that the years of hardship, the countless unseen sacrifices, had shaped a voice that could not be manufactured or taught. It was unique, and it belonged entirely to him. The music seemed to fill every corner of the hall. The polished wooden floors reflected the sound, the empty chairs absorbed it, and even the distant walls seemed to hold it in reverent silence. A few staff members, who had been lingering near the back, stopped in their tracks, unsure if they should interrupt or simply witness. But the sound was too captivating to ignore. They quietly gathered, leaning against doorways or peeking around corners, their eyes wide with astonishment. The janitor's voice had transformed the ordinary hall into a space alive with emotion, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary collided. He reached the middle of the piece, where the notes became more complex and the melody more demanding. His voice didn't falter. Instead, it grew stronger, more expressive. He leaned slightly into the piano, feeling the vibrations beneath his hands, allowing them to guide him, allowing the music to carry him rather than forcing it. For a moment, he forgot himself entirely. There was no janitor, no responsibilities, no long nights or early mornings. There was only music, flowing from him freely, carrying with it the life he had quietly built and the dreams he had long tucked away. The Admiral's smile softened, her eyes shimmering with admiration. She had seen people perform, people trained and polished, people accustomed to attention. But there was nothing rehearsed here, nothing calculated. The janitor's voice was alive with authenticity. She could feel the courage it took for him to share this part of himself, the trust he placed in her to listen without judgment. And in that trust, a bridge formed between them, a rare, human connection that went beyond titles, uniforms, or appearances. The music swelled to its peak, and the janitor's voice rose with it, filling the hall with a power that felt both delicate and commanding. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. He felt the audience in the form of the Admiral and the few quietly observing staff, yet he sang as though the hall itself were his companion. The melodies, the harmonies, and the life behind the voice seemed to blend into one, creating a moment that felt timeless. When he reached the final notes, he allowed them to linger in the air, stretching the last vibrations until they seemed to echo in the corners of the empty hall. Then he stopped, letting silence fall like a soft curtain. The moment was complete, but its impact remained. Everyone in the hall felt it, a collective awareness that they had witnessed something rare and profound. The Admiral stood still for a heartbeat longer than necessary, absorbing the performance. Then she let out a quiet, genuine laugh, soft and warm, breaking the spell of silence. "I didn't expect that," she said, her voice filled with surprise and admiration. "Not in the slightest." She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him, studying his expression, his posture, the subtle flush on his cheeks. "That was remarkable, truly remarkable." The janitor felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. He had always loved music, had always carried it quietly within him, but he had never imagined anyone would hear it like this. The praise, gentle and sincere, felt like sunlight after a long winter. He felt a warmth spread through him that had little to do with pride and everything to do with recognition that he had talent, that he had worth beyond his daily struggles, that someone extraordinary had noticed him. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice still trembling slightly from the emotion. I haven't shared this with anyone in years." His hands rested lightly on the piano, no longer playing, but still connected to the music, as if touching the instrument kept him grounded in the moment. "You don't need to apologize," the Admiral said gently. "You let your voice speak, and that was enough. It was beautiful because it was real. You weren't performing for anyone but yourself, yet you reached all of us." Her words were simple but powerful, and the janitor felt them settling deep in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt visible, seen not as a janitor or a single father struggling through life, but as a person with talent, with dreams, with a voice that mattered. A soft silence fell between them, filled with unspoken understanding. The music had done its work. It had revealed him, opened him up in a way that words could not. The Admiral's eyes were warm, her posture relaxed, yet there was an unmistakable sense of respect and awe in the way she regarded him. She had seen the performance of trained musicians countless times, but this was different. This was life, raw and unfiltered, carrying every experience, every struggle, every moment of quiet perseverance that had shaped the janitor into who he was. "You should never hide this," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Not from yourself, and not from the world. People deserve to hear it. You deserve to share it." The janitor nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. He had spent years hiding his talent, thinking life would never allow it to flourish, thinking the world had no place for someone like him. But now, in this quiet hall, with this unexpected witness, he realized that hiding it had been unnecessary. His life, his struggles, his responsibilities, they hadn't diminished his talent. They had shaped it, given it depth and authenticity. And perhaps it was time to let that talent out into the world, even in small steps. The Admiral smiled faintly, her playful glint returning to her eyes. "And you know," she said, leaning slightly closer, "if you can sing that well under pressure, who knows what else you might be capable of? Maybe the world is ready to hear more from you than you think." He felt a shiver of possibility run through him. The thought of sharing his music beyond these walls was both thrilling and terrifying. Yet for the first time, he felt the courage to consider it. The Admiral had not only recognized his talent, but had given him permission, silent but profound, to believe in himself. As he straightened, the janitor realized that this night had changed something fundamental. It wasn't just the performance, nor the admiration of the Admiral, nor the awe of the few staff who had witnessed it. It was the realization that life had a way of presenting moments when you least expected them, moments that could transform ordinary people into extraordinary ones, even if only for a fleeting instant. He glanced at the Admiral, who gave him a subtle nod, her expression warm but unreadable. "Well," she said lightly, "I think we've discovered something remarkable tonight. I'm glad." D.I. stopped by. Her words were casual, but the sincerity in her voice left no doubt about the impact the performance had on her. The janitor smiled, feeling a rare lightness in his chest. "I'm glad you heard it," he replied softly. He didn't know what the future held, nor did he fully understand what this moment would lead to. But he knew one thing: he had stepped beyond fear, beyond hesitation, and shared a part of himself that had always been waiting to be seen. And in doing so, he had found a connection, a recognition, and a confidence that would stay with him long after the lights in the hall were turned off. For a few quiet moments, the hall was simply filled with the echoes of his song, lingering like a gentle reminder that extraordinary things could happen in the most ordinary of places. And in that silence, the janitor understood that his life had shifted ever so slightly, that the music he had always loved was no longer hidden, and that the world might, at last, hear him. Eridot the janitor took a step back from the piano, letting the last echoes of his song settle into the corners of the hall. The quiet was almost overwhelming after the intensity of the performance. He wiped his hands on his apron almost unconsciously, though the music had left a warmth in him that no cloth could remove. The Admiral, still standing near the piano, gave him a small, approving nod, and for a moment the world outside seemed to fade away. "You really surprised me," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of admiration and amusement. "I didn't expect someone like you to sing that way." Her words made him blink, not out of confusion, but because they were true. He had never been expected to sing in front of anyone, let alone someone of her stature. Most people saw only the uniform, the janitor's role, the routine of his life. No one ever imagined he had hidden depths, talents, or the courage to step into the spotlight, even for a brief moment. He shook his head lightly, a modest smile on his face. I didn't think it mattered," he admitted. "I've sung for years, but always alone, or maybe with my child sometimes. I never thought anyone would care to listen." The Admiral studied him closely, her expression softening. She had seen pride, confidence, and command in her career, but there was something rare about humility wrapped in quiet talent, and it drew her in. "Caring to listen isn't always about talent," she said. "Sometimes it's about presence, about honesty, about sharing a piece of yourself. And you've done that." She leaned slightly against the piano, a casual stance that belied the intensity of her words. The janitor's heart raced. He had shared his music, yes, but never with anyone who had recognized the effort, the story, the life behind it. She wasn't just listening, she was understanding. He felt a lump in his throat. For years he had hidden so much of himself, so many dreams, behind the reality of daily life. Music had been his sanctuary, his way to survive long nights and hard days. And now this woman, this stranger in uniform, had acknowledged it in a way that made him feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. I never expected anyone to notice," he said quietly. "Most people see the uniform, the broom, the janitor, not me." He gestured vaguely to himself, as if encompassing all the small, unnoticed details of his life. The Admiral's eyes softened, and she took a small step closer, bridging the space between them without breaking any boundaries. "You're more than what people see," she said gently. "Everyone has layers, hidden talents, struggles, joys. Most of the world never bothers to look past the surface. But you've let me see a piece of who you are. That matters." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that could lift someone quietly, without any words of praise or reward, but simply with understanding. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time, he felt a sense of release, a lightness in his chest. It was as if the act of sharing his voice had not only reached her ears, but had touched something deeper. He had been carrying a quiet weight for years, one that came from trying to meet life's demands while keeping his dreams alive in secret. Now, in this quiet hall, that weight felt lighter, almost gone. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that is full but gentle, where words are not necessary, because the understanding between two people fills the space entirely. Then the Admiral spoke again, her tone shifting to something warmer, more personal. "Tell me about your child," she said. "I can tell from your face that they are a big part of your life." The janitor smiled, a real, genuine smile that softened his features. "They're everything to me," he said. "I do what I can to make life better for them. Some days it's exhausting. Some days it's joyful beyond words. Music is something I hope to share with them, something that can be a comfort or a joy, just like it has been for me." His voice grew a little stronger, filled with emotion. "I want them to know that even when life is hard, you can still carry a piece of beauty inside you. Music is that for us." The Admiral nodded, her smile gentle but approving. "You've done more than I expected tonight," she said. "Not just because of your voice, but because of the way you've carried yourself, the way you care, the way you've lived your life quietly, but fully. That's rare." Her words were sincere, and the janitor felt them like a small, warm wind brushing over his heart. "I never thought I'd be noticed," he admitted. "I've spent so much time just trying to survive, to provide, that I never considered anyone might see anything else. Most nights I leave this hall quietly, and no one notices me. And now you've listened. You've really listened." "That's because you let me," the Admiral said softly. "You chose to share a part of yourself. That makes a difference. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone dares." She paused for a moment, studying him with eyes that seemed to see past the surface into something deeper. "And that courage, it's impressive. It's inspiring." He looked down at the floor for a moment, trying to absorb her words. Humility had always been a part of him, a shield against the world's expectations. But her recognition wasn't condescending or superficial. It was honest, a reflection of the truth she had seen in him. For the first time, he felt a quiet pride, not of arrogance, but of being acknowledged for something that had always been a part of him. "Sometimes I feel like life is just about surviving," he said quietly. "Waking up, working, taking care of my child, making sure bills are paid. It doesn't leave much room for anything else. Music. It's always been my escape, but I never thought it mattered beyond me." His voice was steady, but it carried a weight that had been quietly accumulating for years. "It does matter," the Admiral said firmly. "Everything that brings you life matters. Music, kindness, courage, talent, love, they all matter. And when you share them, even in small ways, it touches others. You've touched me tonight more than you realize." Her words were simple yet powerful, like sunlight breaking through clouds. He nodded slowly, feeling the warmth spread through him. For years, he had kept this part of himself hidden, fearing judgment, misunderstanding, or indifference. And now, he realized that the world could hold kindness, recognition, and understanding if he was brave enough to share his truth. The Admiral's presence, her words, her acknowledgement, it was a rare gift, one that left him feeling both humbled and encouraged. "I thank you," he said quietly, almost a whisper, "for noticing, for understanding. It means more than I can say." "You don't need to thank me," she replied, her smile gentle. "I'm glad I was here. Sometimes it's not about what we expect to see, but what we allow ourselves to notice. And tonight, I noticed you. That's enough." He allowed himself a small laugh, a soft, genuine sound that had nothing to do with performance or charm, and everything to do with relief and gratitude. "I never thought a simple night of sweeping floors could lead to this," he said. "I never thought someone like you would care about something like me." The Admiral's smile widened faintly. "Care isn't about position or status. It's about seeing people, really seeing them. And you've given me the privilege of seeing someone remarkable, someone who has carried life's challenges and still holds beauty inside. That's inspiring." He felt a lump in his throat again, this time not from nerves, but from the depth of connection he felt. Most nights, he left the hall unnoticed, fading into the quiet darkness of the streets. But tonight, he had shared a part of himself, and it had been recognized, honored, and cherished. He realized that this moment was rare, perhaps once in a lifetime, and he wanted to hold on to it, to remember it, to let it guide him forward. They talked for a while longer, in the quiet hall that had once been empty and now seemed full with possibility. The Admiral asked about his life, his child, the small joys and struggles he faced daily. He spoke openly, cautiously at first, but then with increasing ease. She listened with patience, without interruption, without judgment, as if the world had slowed to allow this connection to deepen. And in that conversation, something shifted. The janitor began to see himself differently, not just as a provider, not just as a worker, not just as a single parent managing life's demands, but as a person capable of beauty, of talent, of connection. The Admiral's presence had opened a door he had long kept closed, revealing a path that might lead somewhere unexpected, somewhere meaningful. By the time the conversation drew to a close, the hall had returned to its quiet state. The soft glow of the lights casting gentle shadows across the floors and walls. The janitor stood near the piano, feeling lighter, freer, more certain that life could hold extraordinary moments, even in the midst of ordinary routines. The Admiral gave him one last approving nod. "Keep singing," she said softly. "For yourself, for your child, for the world. It's worth it." He nodded, a quiet determination settling in him. He had shared a part of himself he had long hidden, and in doing so, he had discovered not only the power of his own voice, but the strength of being seen and recognized. And though the night would end, the connection would remain, a gentle reminder that courage, honesty, and openness could transform even the simplest moments into something extraordinary. For the janitor, the hall, and the music, the night had become unforgettable. And as he finally picked up his broom to finish his work, he carried with him not just the echoes of Mozart, but the understanding that life, even in its quietest, humblest corners, could surprise, uplift, and inspire in ways he had never imagined. The night had grown late, and the janitor was finishing the last few tasks in the quiet concert hall. The broom moved almost automatically over the polished floor, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the evening. The performance, the Admiral, the unexpected recognition. It all felt like a dream, one he wasn't sure he deserved. Yet deep down, he knew it was real. Every note, every glance, every word had left a mark that he could not ignore. He paused for a moment, leaning against the piano and letting the stillness wash over him. The hall was empty, the lights casting gentle shadows across the seats, yet he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Music had always been his refuge, but tonight it had become something more. It had connected him to another human being in a way that reminded him of the power of sharing, of being brave, of stepping beyond the ordinary. When he returned home that night, the exhaustion of a long day was present, but it was mixed with a strange exhilaration. His child, sleepy-eyed but curious, asked about his evening. The janitor smiled, ruffling their hair gently. "Nothing special," he said, though he knew the truth was different. It had been a special night, one that might change the way he looked at his own life. He tucked his child into bed, humbly proud of the music he had shared, and quietly allowed himself a moment to savor the joy and courage he had discovered. Over the next few days, the performance lingered in his mind. The Admiral's words, the admiration, and the sense of being truly seen stayed with him. He went about his work in the hall, cleaning, sweeping, and organizing. But now each task felt a little lighter, a little more purposeful. He realized that the music was not just a private refuge anymore. It was a part of him that could touch others, if he allowed it. And perhaps, if he dared, it could open doors he had never imagined. Word of the performance, small as it was, began to spread. The Admiral, impressed by the talent she had witnessed, mentioned it to a few colleagues and friends. They were curious, some skeptical at first, but intrigued enough to visit the hall and hear the janitor sing. One evening, a small group gathered quietly to listen, and as the janitor began to sing again, the impact was immediate. The same sincerity, the same depth, the same life behind the voice that had captivated the Admiral now resonated with others. People were moved, not just by the technical skill, but by the raw honesty, the courage, the humanity that shone through each note. The janitor, initially nervous about performing for anyone besides the Admiral, began to feel a quiet confidence. He realized that music had a power beyond entertainment. It had the power to connect, to inspire, to remind people of the beauty and strength that existed even in ordinary lives. Every performance, no matter how small, became a way to reach out, to share a part of himself that had long been hidden. In the days that followed, opportunities began to present themselves, almost unexpectedly. A community center invited him to perform at a small recital. A local school asked if he could teach music to children who had limited access to lessons. Each invitation brought a mixture of excitement and anxiety, but he remembered the Admiral's encouragement, and slowly he began to accept. With every performance, with every lesson, he found himself more at ease, more certain that this was not just a hobby. It was a gift meant to be shared. His child watched these changes with quiet curiosity. At first, they were confused by the new attention, the small crowds, the applause that followed each song. But over time, they began to understand that their parent had a talent, a voice that could inspire others. They began to see the joy it brought, the pride it instilled, and they joined in subtly, helping to set up small events, handing out music sheets, or simply listening quietly from the back. The bond between them deepened, strengthened by shared moments of music, laughter, and discovery. Even the Admiral remained a presence in his life, though not in a constant, intrusive way. She would occasionally stop by, sometimes unexpectedly, to check on his performances or to offer encouragement. Her visits were brief, often casual, but always filled with genuine interest and warmth. She had not only recognized his talent, but had helped him see it for himself, reminding him that courage, honesty, and dedication could open doors in ways he had never imagined. One afternoon, the janitor was invited to perform at a small charity event. Nervous yet determined, he stepped onto the modest stage, his child sitting in the front row, watching intently. As he sang, he realized that he was no longer performing for himself alone. Each note carried the hopes of his child, the admiration of the community, and the quiet memory of the Admiral's smile. The music flowed effortlessly, the emotion palpable, and when the final note lingered in the air, the applause was immediate, heartfelt, and genuine. It was a moment of realization for him. Life had always been a series of challenges, responsibilities, and sacrifices, but it had also been filled with hidden beauty, waiting to be shared. He understood now that extraordinary moments were possible even in ordinary lives. And that courage, the courage to reveal one's true self, could transform not only the performer, but everyone who witnessed it. With each passing day, he continued to balance his work, his parenting, and his music. It was not always easy. There were long nights, early mornings, and countless small sacrifices. But now, there was also a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had been missing for years. Music had become a bridge, connecting him to his child, to his community, and to opportunities he had never imagined. It had also reminded him that being noticed, being seen, and being valued could come from the most unexpected places. People began to speak of him, not as the quiet janitor in the back of the hall, but as someone with talent, integrity, and perseverance. The story of his performance and the Admiral's playful challenge spread slowly, inspiring others to look beyond appearances and recognize hidden potential in those around them. It was a reminder that talent and courage could exist in the most unexpected places, and that extraordinary things could emerge from ordinary lives. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a local school, he sat quietly backstage, letting the applause and the energy of the audience settle. His child came to sit beside him, their small hand slipping into his. "You were amazing," they whispered. "I want to sing like you someday." The janitor smiled, feeling a quiet pride and warmth. "You can," he said softly. "You just have to believe in yourself and practice. Music is a part of us, but it's also a part of everyone who dares to try." The Admiral's influence continued to resonate in his life, not as a constant presence, but as a guiding memory. She had seen his talent when no one else had encouraged him to share it, and had given him the confidence to believe in himself. That single night, a moment that had seemed so small and casual at the time, had sparked a transformation that extended far beyond music. It had opened doors, strengthened relationships, and ignited a courage that had been quietly waiting. The janitor now understood that life's unexpected moments could lead to remarkable change. A simple act of bravery singing in an empty hall for someone who cared enough to listen had become the turning point in his life. It was a lesson he carried forward in every note he sang, in every interaction he had, and in every choice he made. The music was no longer just his refuge. It was his connection to the world, a reminder of the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Even as he continued his daily routines, sweeping floors, cleaning stages, caring for his child, he did so with a renewed sense of purpose. The music, the recognition, the encouragement, and the connections he had made were woven into the fabric of his life. Each day brought new challenges, as life always did. But now there was also hope, possibility, and the knowledge that hidden talents and quiet courage could change not just one life, but the lives of those around them. The janitor's story, once quiet and unnoticed, became a symbol for others in his community. People began to speak of him not just as someone who worked hard, but as someone who had dared to reveal a hidden gift, someone who had shown that courage and authenticity could inspire and uplift. It reminded everyone that greatness could exist in humble places, and that sometimes the most powerful moments were born from ordinary acts done with honesty and heart. And through it all, the janitor continued to sing, not for fame or recognition, but for the simple joy it brought to himself, his child, and those who had the privilege to hear. The music became a part of his life in a way that transcended ordinary work or responsibility. It connected him to his past, his hopes, and his dreams, and reminded him that even in life's quiet corners, extraordinary moments could emerge when courage met opportunity. The Admiral remained a quiet but enduring presence in his memory, a symbol of encouragement, recognition, and the power of seeing someone for who they truly were. She had given him a chance that he never expected, and in doing so, she had helped him believe in himself. That belief became a guiding light, shaping his choices, his music, and the way he shared himself with the world. The janitor's journey, once defined by routine and quiet struggle, had transformed into a story of courage, discovery, and human connection. Music had revealed his hidden talent, the Admiral had acknowledged his worth, and his own bravery had allowed him to step forward into something greater. Life had not changed overnight, but it had shifted in profound ways, showing that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, sometimes with just a single brave act out. And so, each day, he continued to sweep the floors, care for his child, and share his music. Each note, each melody, each performance was a reminder of what had started in that quiet hall, the night when a simple act of courage had frozen everyone. Even a Navy admiral can change the course of his life forever.